A pair of lovers on the wrong side of the law, Bonnie and Clyde became the stuff of legend following a crime spree that terrorized the Midwest. Their love of violence and mayhem was almost as strong as their love for one another, yet despite their notoriety, only a handful of photos of the dangerous duo have been available to the public. But now, years later, new photos of Bonnie, Clyde, and their gang have emerged, and these unedited images prove there was more to the criminal couple's story than the history books let on. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow. Not many people believe in fate, but forces were definitely at play when Bonnie Parker met Clyde Barrow way back in 1930. A mutual friend had broken his arm, and by chance the two just happened to be visiting him on the exact same day. Criminals. Their chemistry was instant, though this was no fairy tale meeting. Clyde was already heavily involved in criminal activity by this point, and Bonnie, left, was actually married to another man at the time. 3 months later. To make matters worse, Clyde was arrested just 3 months later for a series of robberies he'd committed. He spent 2 years in the slammer and was released in 1932. In wait. As soon as he stepped from the prison, Bonnie was there waiting for him. The 22-year-old Texas girl had no prior criminal history, though it was clear she was willing to go to hell and back for her lawbreaker love. The Barrow Gang. The couple's gang, dubbed the Barrow Gang, started off small at first, their criminal activities centered on the small towns of north-central Texas. Together, Bonnie and Clyde robbed gas stations, stole guns, and even tried to bust their fellow gang members out of prison. Bonnie's boon. Just weeks into their crime spree, Bonnie was arrested while trying to rob guns from a hardware store. She only spent a few months in prison, however, and the criminal couple picked up right where they left off as soon as she got out. Bolder. The gang soon grew increasingly bold in their crimes, even going as far as murdering sheriffs and officers of the law. Bonnie hadn't been a criminal to start, but by this point, she'd definitely acquired a taste for life on the lam. Expansion. Along with their criminal activities, the gang's area of operation expanded as well. They pushed beyond Texas, stirring up trouble in places like Missouri, Louisiana, and even as far north as Minnesota. Double date danger. The gang soon grew so successful that even family members wanted in on the action. Clyde's brother, Buck, and his wife Blanche joined the ranks, turning their robberies into one heck of a dangerous double date. Oh, Fortuna! But their string of good fortune hit a snag when a police tip forced the gang to flee their Joplin, Missouri, hideout in 1933, their possessions left scattered about the house, including 2 rolls of film. To the press. The photos soon began making the rounds in papers across the country, serving to add fuel to the already raging fire surrounding the gang and their crimes. Yet not every image painted Bonnie and Clyde as ruthless, bloodthirsty outlaws. A spectacle for the public. In some, the gang's youth and playfulness shone through, surprising many with how utterly normal they appeared to be. Bonnie and Clyde, of course, generated the most attention. Who could resist a good-looking couple whose love for one another had carried over into their life of crime? Glorified. Bonnie was especially romanticized by the media, the recovered photos depicting her as a rough and tough Southern gal who wasn't afraid to run with the bad boys. This photo of her beside Clyde's Ford V8 remains one of her most iconic. Most wanted. But as the tale of Bonnie and Clyde climbed its way up the headlines, so too did the Barrow Gang up the most wanted list. With all eyes peeled for the celebrity criminal's next move, the gang soon discovered that fame comes at a high price. Ambush. While laying low south of Platte City, Missouri, the Barrow Gang was ambushed by highway patrol officers in an armored car. Though Bonnie and Clyde managed to escape the assault, Buck was killed and Blanche, below, was captured. Swaying minds. Public opinion toward the outlaw couple also began to shift after one of the gang members murdered 2 patrolmen near Grapevine, Texas. It was falsely reported that Bonnie had maliciously carried out the Grapevine killings, leaving many demanding the gang's execution. Louisiana State Highway 154. Law enforcement officials managed to chart the gang's regular movements around county lines. leading them to a rendezvous point that happened to be the home of one of the gang members' family. Hidden along Louisiana State Highway 154, the posse of lawmen waited for Bonnie and Clyde to arrive. The grand finale. On the morning of May 23, 1934, officers opened fire on Clyde's stolen Ford V8. After completely emptying their weapons on the fugitives, Bonnie and Clyde's blood-spattered crime spree had finally come to an end. Back again. In the years that followed, the story of Bonnie and Clyde gradually faded into obscurity, becoming just another chapter of American outlaw history. But in 1967, the criminal couple burst back into the public consciousness, and it was all thanks to Hollywood. Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway's portrayal in Bonnie and Clyde cemented the dastardly duo as the romantic icons they are today. Still, they wouldn't have reached spectacular and terrible heights without those who set the stage before them. Outlaw inspiration. During Bonnie and Clyde's infamous crime spree, many drew parallels between the couple and a number of other outlaws from history, including the famed Doc Holliday. Though the iconic gunslinger and gambler was far less dastardly than his criminal counterparts, his daring and dangerous exploits truly put the wild in the Wild West. Southern-born. The man known as Doc was born John Henry Holliday in Griffin, Georgia, on August 14, 1851. He had a cleft palate, which required surgery and impacted his speech. His doting mother worked with him for countless hours on proper pronunciation, and eventually, they vanquished the impediment. Great life. Doc had a wonderful childhood. His father was a pharmacist and his mother was a dedicated caregiver and teacher, bestowing the importance of manners on him. He was also an excellent student, especially in math and science. He was also a big reader. Becoming a dentist. Sadly, his mom died in 1866 from tuberculosis. Doc threw himself into his studies to cope with her death, and his good grades got him into dentistry school at the University of Pennsylvania. Doc graduated in 1872 and began working as a dentist. New interest. When Doc was 22, he moved his practice to Dallas, Texas. It was a rowdy place. His business was steady, but Doc quickly grew distracted by another passion, gambling. He loved the nightlife and frequented the many saloons. Getting a reputation. Doc was an excellent card player, which he often combined with drinking and fighting. This soon eclipsed his dental practice. He was arrested for these activities, as well as for getting into a gunfight with the saloon keeper.